Hello and welcome to the Auto Limits channel, where we are continuing our quest for a fuller understanding of the films of Samuel Fuller. My name is Craig Ennis, and with me as ever is Robert Beams. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Craig. How are you doing today?
I'm good. We're colour coordinated.
We are. I did see that when you logged in, and I wondered if I should go change, but I can't be asked. It does seem like we turned up in the same outfit.
Well, it's very
Yes,
seasonal, isn't it? It's
it
very
is. It's
seasonal.
bright and sunny in spring now, so it's nice to be in yellow.
Yeah,
Is yours an Arsenal-related yellow?
it is. It's a 1971.
Excellent,
Hang on, 1971 Cup final replica.
lovely,
I'm assuming
lovely.
it's replica. I don't think it's genuinely, but
An original, yeah.
yeah.
Um, so, what are we watching today, Craig? Or what have we just watched?
We have just watched Underworld U.S.A, which it's not a good joke. I won't make that joke. It was going to be about Born Slippy, but I couldn't quite get to the joke in time, so never mind.
So, Underworld
Underworld
USA, 1961. This one, we
Yeah,
the last three Fuller films we've done, I think, were all in 1959. So he's given himself 1960 off, I guess,
yeah.
as a reward.
He's gone through a bit of a time at this point. He's kind of
Okay.
well, he's basically been trying to get Big Red One off the ground, and had a quite a large deal for that. Um, but they wanted John. The money was contingent on having John Wayne in the lead, and after some chats with some of his friends, they basically went, "No, it'll be a compromised version of your film that's going to turn into something quite jingoistic." So he put that to one side again. He'd also been his mother had died at the end of 1959, and his marriage had collapsed as well. So he'd kind of gone through quite a lot personally at this point. Um, I think his marriage collapse is quite amicable, judging by the 2 paragraphs that he gives to it in his biography. So take that with a pinch of salt. But yeah, he basically said that he takes a little bit of time out, considering this comes out in 1961 in March, and that Crimson Kimono came out in October of 1959. In terms of time off, it's
Wasn't much.
it's not much. It's just noticeable from the pace that he usually kind of churns things out at, that there is a 2 year gap. But yeah,
Yes.
that's what brings us to Underworld USA, a time where he's feeling quite beleaguered in his personal life, and a
Okay.
little bit kind of don't know. Is it fair to say there's a little bit of cynicism and bitterness in this film?
I don't know if there's more than usual. I mean, it feels very much like a Sam Fuller movie, for better or worse. This one, like,
Yeah,
I went through all of the usual Sam Fuller. My viewing experience of it was pretty much in step with my median Sam Fuller viewing experience,
start
which
strong,
was
moves
that
its way.
started great. I almost messaged you about 10 minutes in saying, yeah, this is a good one, but I thought better hold off because I've been burned before. And then the predictable happens where there's just like a romance story that gets involved that's kind of unearned, and you kind of it loses focus in some way. It changes tone and genre even seemingly a few times, and then because you have that thing, I can't remember which one it was now. Was it the one that was on a boat where it started off with that really great bit in Japan where there was like a train robbery or something,
Yeah,
and
I
it
think
like
so.
and I was like, oh cool, this is really awesome. And then that's obviously got nothing to do with what the film's like at all. And it was similar here, like it started off like it was going to be I don't know, like a film of the Elvis Presley song In the Ghetto, and then it kind of just takes several turns, which we'll get through as we talk about it. But like, yeah, I felt I didn't detect any additional bitterness. I detected the same mix it reminded me of Edward, or at least the Edward of the Tim Burton film Edward, because I don't know much about the real Edward. But this idea of like much more technical competence than Edward, but this idea of a kind of slightly misplaced idea that he's making like really important message movies, but he's actually making trash. And it's like there's a lot of films where that goes further, like Verboten, for example. He's got some quite interesting things to say, and he comes at things, as we talked about in the episode, he comes at things with a mallet. You know, it's not subtle, but there is some depth to it, and there is some interesting stuff, and he does have some points he's making that are worth making and entertaining. And then this one feels like a juvenile delinquents kind of moral panic movie in its messaging, but like 10 years after they were like a big deal, or at least on the crest on the when those films are at least on the way out, you know. And it's got lots of bits. You know that bit I always think when I think of like heavy-handed moralizing bolted on messaging in movies, the gold standard for me is always like that famous like last 5 minutes of Psycho, where it like goes to those old men in a room who are just suddenly going like, see, he had a trouble with his mother or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, there are loads of scenes like that just in the middle of this movie where it just cuts to a policeman talking about like the scourge of juvenile delinquency and oh, now they're aiming at the kids or whatever. And, you know, it cuts to like a criminal overlord going like, yes, we need to send more people to the schools and target the children and give them drugs, whatever. It was very like, almost verging towards the acting scenes in porn in terms of just the lack of any like real dynamism or like feeling of genuine drama in those sequences. And I really liked it. Whenever I feel like the film lost its way because it was like the main character, Uncle Ben from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. But Cliff Robertson's the actor. He's a guy called Tully. The beginning of the movie is him as a kid, and he witnesses his father's murder, and it kind of sends him. He's already kind of going into a life of petty crime. I think there's quite a cool. Yeah, he's already done stuff like that. There's a woman who runs like a bar or something. I think she's called like Sandy or something. Who's like an old lady who kind of takes him in and is a kind of a mother figure to him. And she says something like, "Oh, you're on the path to the electric chair" or something like that. Like really early on when he's like a kid, and like he sees some guys murder his dad in an alleyway, and then he decides that he's gonna get his own revenge because he ain't no fink and he's not gonna tell the cops anything, and he's gonna deal with it his own way. And he's on the back of a car screaming at the cops, "I'm gonna take care of these guys my own way." Do you think it'd be a massive red flag to the cops to just be like, well, watch this guy? But like he basically, you get a bit of a montage for the first 10 minutes, I suppose, of like, I didn't time it, but it feels maybe like it's the first sort of 10 minutes ish of the film. You get this kind of montage of his escalating life of crime, getting involved in worse and worse things, of robbery and things like that. Then he ends up in prison and he becomes the adult and he becomes played by Cliff Robertson. He meets one of the guys who killed his father and kills that guy. But before he kills him, he gets the names of the 3 other people who were involved in killing his dad. When he comes out of prison, he then finds these guys really conveniently like all next to each other in the newspaper with their names underneath them, and they're all now like involved, and their occupations like prostitution, drugs, whatever. They're all involved in like this like crime organization. They're no longer these street toughs who killed his dad, and they're all actually like pillars of this like criminal empire. So he does a bad sleep well, where he infiltrates the organization in order to take out the people he's got a grievance with. And the film then becomes him and this kind of this assassin guy called Gus, who when you first meet him, he's like ridiculously cool because he has this bit where he gets the message on the phone to kill the main female love interest, who, by the way, has got another stupid female love interest name in a full film. She's called Cuddles or something like that, right? I think she's called Cuddles. And he gets the word to kill Cuddles. And the first thing this guy does is he like puts his sunglasses on indoors. And that's obviously something he does when he kills people, because Cuddles sees it. She's like, "Oh shit! Oh wait! Oh, I'll do what you want." And then he says, "I'm gonna miss you, baby." I just love that he put his sunglasses on and said, "I'm going to miss you, baby," before about to kill this woman. But anyway, Gus and Tully, they kind of go around trying to bump off all these other these pillars of the whatever, because he cons his way into them. He pretends to help them so he can kind of get in and blah blah blah. It was really interesting. I wonder if you know that I've definitely seen this exact setup before. Obviously, it reminded me of Bad Sleep Well, but
Yeah,
I
which is
feel like
only
there's another.
only the year before Bad Sleep Well,
Yeah,
1960.
yeah, no, yeah, I noted that, but I feel like there's a film more directly analogous to it, where like the idea of leaving prison and then bumping off these people who have now got other lives, who were involved in something earlier in your life before you went away. I feel like I've seen a thriller that takes exactly that, like possibly from later, like the 70s. But there's
Well,
definitely it's definitely
it's
something
a
I've
sort of
seen
Count of
done.
Monte Cristo setup, isn't it? It's that sort of story. Like I can't think of anything that's directly analogous, but like you say, I did think it's very, very similar to the Bad Sleep Well as I was watching it, at
Yeah,
least at story level. Um,
and
yeah, I
yes,
mean,
you get just to round up the story. So he goes and he kind of takes them all out, and then he's gonna try and get away with Cuddles and settle down for a life outside of this world. But he goes on that one final revenge kill, doesn't he? And he ends up taking a bullet and dying in an alleyway. So that's kind
same
of the
alleyway.
arc of this kid. The same alleyway his father died in. Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of the overall what the film is. I know you liked it quite a lot. You said it was like a really good one.
Yeah, I
So
didn't. I mean,
maybe,
I thought it was pretty decent. It's funnily enough, it's a really well regarded one. Like um, it was put into the sort of National Library of Congress, their archive vault. You know, every year they select 10 films or whatever
mm,
it is to go in for film preservation in the Library of Congress, and this has been selected for that at some point. Not sure exactly what year it went in, but like, yeah, it's a well regarded one, and I don't know if that's necessarily. It made me think a little bit of a sort of like Steven Soderberghy kind of idea setup where it's trying to show you from street level all the way through, and how this
mm,
the actual at the upper echelons, it's um, it's linked in with sort of government power. It's linked in with corruption. It's linked in with a social respectability and that kind of thing. It was like a going for this sort of multi-layered overview of the whole thing. Whether or not it does that entirely successfully is something else entirely.
he's definitely it's definitely one of the films that's being kind of feeding in from his previous life as a journalist and wanting
Yes.
to sort of talk about the crime and things like that. Yeah, for me, like I said, it was a bit soapboxy. And when it started off, I was like, um, it felt like something, because I thought it was going to be a juvenile delinquent movie, like straight up for the first sort of 10-15 minutes, and then the juvenile delinquency stuff comes back later, but it's more of like a social problem they're talking
Yeah.
about.
Well, it's weird
Scourge to our youth, crime affecting the youth.
because
Yeah.
the thing is, I mean, he's very deliberately. Tully's very, he's on a bad path anyway, but he kind of doubles down in attempt. Basically, he's trying to get himself into prison, specifically the same prison, isn't it? It's like a all-consuming revenge thing, even from an early age. He doesn't just sort of
Mm.
go off the rails and happenstance kind of lands in there. It's kind of a very deliberate act on his part to sort of get himself put away. Um, so it's quite that's what I meant in terms of being quite a bitter kind of cynical film. Like
Mm.
it's he's not he's not a likable lead.
They
You're not
never are, though.
they're
The
never.
fuller leads are never likable leads. Like you can go all the way back to Baron of Arizona and stuff, where like his leads are like always kind of at the very best, like kind of amiable huckster con men, trying to get rich. They're not. Yeah, so I didn't really stand out to me in that respect. And especially because the ending is the moralistic one of like, obviously this leads him to ruin and all of that, which he normally would get. Like he can't escape this life and all this kind of thing. Which I guess is cynical in of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it as necessarily moralistic, as more kind of he's a nihilist, doesn't believe in anything. Uh,
Yeah. I guess it's just because I believe still in this era in like 1961, I think there were restrictions still, weren't there, generally on whether you could kind of show criminals kind of getting away with things and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And
So
this
I
is
might be wrong on that, but I thought that was kind of once someone's done a load of bad stuff in a movie from this era, generally they have to die at the end. They can't go
yeah. I mean,
go
once
down
again,
with the wind.
he talks about things in his biography that were compromised as per usual. Talks about not being able to use things like the crime. He wasn't actually allowed to call it the crime commission. He had to use the crime committee because some of the things that he was saying about law enforcement and whatever, the studios were really kind of reluctant to let him say, like, you know, you're not allowed to say that all these people are corrupt and there's crime going on at the highest levels and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's that sort of it's, you know, some of the rough edges, and it's still got plenty of rough edges to it, but some of the even rougher edges were kind of taken down even further. I'm just seeing if I've got see what I've got here.
What in the fuller book?
Yeah, I mean, there's, for example, so there is a here we go. This just having a look for this. My screenshotting didn't work particularly well today. But he talks about this original idea for the opening that was basically about unionization of sex workers. So there is this sort of rabble-rousing leader who's sort of getting all the sex workers together and saying, look, we need to ban the pimps, we need to have a minimum wage, we need to have protection, we need to have places to go, and all this kind of stuff. Sort of really progressive ideas, basically. And she's sort of taken down within the first sort of 5 minutes or so by outside forces. And that was the original kind of original opening sequence for the film that he wasn't allowed to use for, you know, just sort of moralistic kind of you know, trying to avoid causing a scandal. And that's why he rewrote it as that kind of almost the more kind of cyclical, sort of straightforward narrative. But that kind of shows you a little bit more of what he was originally going for, this kind of broad overview. This is what's happening over here, this is what's happening over here, this is what's happening over here, and trying to connect all the dots.
I think I always find it difficult with films where I don't mind a film with multiple points of view, and Soderbergh's a good example. Films like
Yeah.
Traffic or you know, Contagion. Or I don't mind a film that goes between lots of characters and takes that kind of The Wire type approach of kind of showing everything from the bottom to the top and kind of showing how everything works. I think what made me struggle with that in this one was that we're with Tully for the first half hour or whatever, pretty much exclusively as the protagonist. Then you suddenly get taken out to, oh, so now we're a fly on the wall in this room with these like criminal leaders, and now we're randomly in this room with this detective and he's talking to the cops. And it's like, it really felt like, it felt disjointed and it felt like a weird tonal shift. I think if you, obviously there are no like hard and fast rules, you can do whatever you want, like, but I think for me, if you're sticking with a character very consistently for the first half an hour, then you're setting up the expectation, at least for me, that you're following that character and that what you'll see in the events through that character.
There isn't any secondary or tertiary characters that you kind of really see the whole thing through the eyes of either, is there? There's people that Tully kind of intersects with, but we never really see their point of views other than the kind of Fuller-esque monologues and whatnot, like the scene with the scene you're talking about, the juvenile delinquency and the kind of the crime commissioner sort of talking to everybody, is really reminded me of that scene in Verboten where the guy just kind of starts talking about the black market and the kind of the what they call the wolves, and just sorts of lays everything out on a very kind of expositional level. And it would have been nicer to have seen more of that Would have been much nicer to seen that more of that in the actual narrative within sort of plot points, than rather than just sort of stop the film to espouse it. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite. I mean, it doesn't really do what it intends to do. I mean, I think the things that it's saying are, again, probably quite shocking for the time, and I can see why it had a bit of an impact and was kind of regarded in that way and taken into Library of Congress. But at a sort of cinematic level, it doesn't really pull any of that off. I don't think it needs to commit one way or the other. It either needs to do this kind of tragic hero story, or the others, or the kind of Soderberghian kind of approach. Kind of falls between two stools a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Most of my notes for the first sort of half of the movie are all kind of skewed towards stuff about juvenile delinquency movies, because it kind of felt like it was about that and then kind of wasn't. So I ended up sort of looking at the fact that, you know, you got films like Gun Crazy in 1950, films like The Wild One in
Which I wasn't
53.
expecting. I'm sorry, just to go back to Gun Crazy. It's a very literal title, that film. I wasn't quite
It is.
expecting the actual words "gun crazy" to be used multiple times within the film.
Yeah, you're so
Anyway,
gun crazy, kid. Yeah, so you got like, I was just looking at this thing. It kind of ended up not being super relevant, but I've made my notes. So I'm going to finish. I'm going to
yeah,
mention them. Like that, you got films like, because I kind of see like Gun Crazy as an early example of that sort of juvenile delinquency subgenre. I don't know if it's regarded as such, but it kind of strikes me as that, these kind of wayward kids getting in over their head and getting into crime and being obsessed with, you know, things that they maybe shouldn't be. You obviously get the Wild One, Marlon Brando, 53, and then I think you get the peak of these things in 55, of like Rebel Without a Cause, Blackboard Jungle. And then I was looking at lists online of like juvenile delinquency movies, like the really trashy ones, the ones that are just called things like, I don't know, T-Bird Girls or whatever, just like weird, just fucking exploitative ones. And those ones were all from about 57, 58. So I kind of got this impression from that, of this arc of like this interesting little subgenre over sort of exposure of it kind of cresting a wave and going too far, and then being a bit trashy and people being a bit fed up with it, and then you being, you know, this comes out the same year as West Side Story, so getting to the other side where now it's like, it's really, I like West Side Story, but the edges have been completely softened, and like it's now basically very tame. And the first sort of 10 minutes, that was my feeling about this, was just that, like, and I enjoyed the first 10 minutes, I really liked them. But like, I was thinking, like, this kind of does feel like an old man who's just gone in on delinquency movies at the
yeah.
very
Which, I
end.
mean, you can say. I know what you mean, but that would, to me, seem out of character for him, because he
Yeah.
always seems like with Steel Helmet and things like that. He always seems to be pushing forward ever so slightly. So maybe he's using those tropes as something that's well established in the beginning to sort of, which is, you know, let's round out the first 10 minutes in this way and then push on
Yeah.
forward with
It does. It goes through several different sort of tonal shifts and almost like genre shifts. And what I noticed was, because originally, like I say, it felt like it was this like juvenile delinquency movie, and then it becomes very quickly like, it seems like, okay, is this just a pure like revenge movie? It becomes a kind of a crime thriller at various points. There are bits that are played for suspense. There are bits that become much more procedural. There are bits that say like, hey everyone, this is a social problem film, which every Fuller film's got a scene that goes, hey everyone, this is a social problem film. But this one's got a few of those scenes. So it just feels very uneven in that
I
respect
know
as
what you
well.
mean.
I would like to have just stayed with Tully and just infiltrated the crime organization in that spirit with him, in a kind of more
Yeah, I mean,
maintained that kind of noirish thriller crime film mode.
because I started watching it and thinking, when I first started watching it, I did think, was Cliff Robertson a childhood actor? Like, you know, is this like a really young Cliff Robertson? Obviously, it goes on quickly, and you see, and Uncle
Yeah.
Ben turns up, and you go, oh no, there's Uncle Ben. But I was enjoying that, like you. And then when it moved to prison, I was thinking, oh, we're going to get like an extended prison film. I'd like to see that. I'd like to have seen him sort of making his way from his cell into the prison block, into the medical block, staying there, having to wait to get access to this fella, and then sort of having maybe another one of the guys that killed his father in a different block, in a different kind, and sort of working through the gangs, trying to get close to people, that kind of thing. That's what I thought I was going to get for a little while. And no, this guy gives up his friends and he's out of prison. Seemingly quite quickly for a kid with such a long arrest record. He doesn't spend a lot of time in prison. Like, it seems like
doesn't it go from him being like a teenager to being Cliff Robertson in prison? I got the feeling he'd been in there for a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, but he goes in and out, doesn't he? He gets picked up. He goes to reform school. He comes back out again. He does something else. He gets put into prison. He's like 27. He's 27 when he comes out. I think that's
Cliff Robertson's playing 27.
27 or 29 or something. That's what I thought I picked up on.
He looks. I think early 60s 27 is like is like 45 today, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's it's a well kind of established sort of canard, but like when you see pictures of people, like like Jack Charlton was playing football in his mid to late 30s with that comb over, That's what a 35-year-old man looked like in 1965.
Exactly. So I've just got a few notes here before we move on from the beginning of the film. So I really I really
sorry
like
for calling out Jack Charlton now.
Oh no, don't. He that is like the most famous thing about Jack Charlton, I think, is the big comb over. Not to obviously anybody listening from outside of the UK, I would imagine. But anyway, Auld Lang Syne is put to very good use. You get the composer Harry Suckman, which is such a great name for kind of B-movie thriller composer. Harry Suckman, who also composed the music for 40 Guns and Crimson Kimono, and I think at least one other Fuller film. And he uses Auld Lang Syne at the beginning because I think the beginning's taking place. It's like a Shane Black movie. It's like randomly at Christmas at the beginning or something like that. And Auld Lang Syne's playing, and like, but it's used like ominously. It's like a cool, like, dangerous Auld Lang Syne in the background that says foreboding, and it kind of happens a few times. This kind of comes in the first part, which I thought was pretty good. I also made note of just how fucking tactless Tully is as a boy. When he Sandy's got all these dolls, so she's got like a doll, and he says something like, "My dad told me why you like dolls. It's because you can't have a kid of your own," or something like that. And I was like, "Whew, okay." And it doesn't really, other than the idea that she is like a kind of a surrogate mother to him, that she's taken him in as a son, I didn't really see the need for a kind of she can't have babies, she's got dolls element. I don't think that really paid off. It kind of feels very dashed off, but it was also very just like very blunt the way he said that. And it also is really like, it's very like armchair psychology, isn't it? To be like, oh, this woman can't have a baby, so she's kind of obsessed with the doll. It's very, not. I don't think that's Fuller's finest characterization. I also got a note in the beginning section of the film, lots of very good close-ups. I feel like the beginning sort of 10-15 minutes is a mix of really cheap shots that look like they're on a set somewhere, and then really good close-ups, and it kind of cuts between the two. There are some really fantastic, like really like just impactful, really expressive, kind of interesting close-ups, and the editing's quite rapid sometimes into them, right? Like it will just cut in very close to somebody and then cut away, and you're looking at a cardboard alleyway again. But it's I really like that. Those are some of my early notes on the film. I don't know if
I did like the sort of shadows as his father's being beaten up, and you got the shadows on the wall. It felt very kind of very Batman to me, like that sort of classic kind of animated series 90s kind of style gothic look to it that was really quite nice. I enjoyed that.
This kid is poor Batman, isn't he?
He's poor Batman.
He's poor Batman. If your dad gets murdered in an alleyway, but you're not a billionaire, then your life of vigilante justice just gets you put in like prison and gets you
Yeah.
killed. That's
Yeah.
what this film's about. It's about the tragedy of wanting to be Batman if you're not wealthy. Okay, interesting. So what else have I
I
got
feel
here?
like you want to rewatch it now, Rob, with through that lens,
Through that lens, yeah. Um, yeah, I've got
which makes Sandy his Alfred, I guess.
Sandy is his Alfred. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's yes, exactly. Maybe this is like an alt universe Batman, like a Bruce Wayne from another reality. Anyway, I've also got some notes here. Yeah, I've got never judge a Fuller by the first 10 minutes, which I think is sound advice. He's always on a soapbox about something and it's never subtle. Yeah, okay, here's one. So there's a bit in the film where there's a guy that the criminals are concerned is gonna rat them out. And in order to put the squeeze on him to stop this guy ratting them out, they just kill his kid. It's straight like killing somebody's kid's presumably not a very effective way of keeping
No,
them from
you
fucking you
threaten
over.
to kill their kid.
You threaten to kill the kid, and then they don't rat you out. If you just kill the kid, then that increases my likelihood of ratting you out.
I
I
tell you what I
don't
did
understand
notice
that
about
play.
that as well, though. That scene, it very, very much reminded me of Assault on Precinct 13. I haven't been able to find a direct link or Carpenter saying that that's where he was inspired for it by, but it just made me think of that because she's very kind of G Mister, blonde haired, kind of
Yeah,
living behind a picket fence kind of gee whiz child on her bike
yeah, exactly.
who gets ploughed down by Gus and his glasses.
Yeah, it's very like this is that thing again where it comes down to Fuller not being particularly subtle, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. By the way, I don't think things have to be subtle. I think sometimes we put maybe too much emphasis on the need for subtlety, especially like when you're talking about big stuff in movies that can be on a larger level and kind of have that sort of it's larger than life, isn't it? But you do definitely have criminals who wear sunglasses and look kind of mean, and then like literally a blonde girl with pigtails with a little bike going like, "Oh, hey, Jay, mister. Oh, can I have some candy?" And then she gets like mowed down. And it's very broad, isn't it? There isn't like any, it doesn't feel, this film doesn't feel lived in, which is not true of every Fuller film of this kind. Like, it doesn't feel like a real world you could step
It
into,
doesn't
I
feel
wouldn't
like
say.
Pick Up on South Street, like where
Yeah.
which does feel completely cohesive. And yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's so disparate, moving from one place to the other, because there are things that he's obviously saying. He's saying it's tough for a kid on the streets. It's tough to, in order for Sandy to make a living, she has to rub up against these other elements, but she's basically a decent person. Saying that Cuddles, hasn't got a chance. She's caught up in it all. These people are quite. There's heartless killers who work for these people. They're happy to kill your kids. These people have risen to the top, and crime does pay. And there's no way they're going to come down unless somebody takes matters into their own hands. It's all tied up with the police. He's shouting all these different things, and he has got a good overview of it, and he has got that sort of lived experience where he's seen a lot of this stuff. But he's just sort of jumping from one thing to another, explaining all these things separately, but it's difficult. The kind of connective tissue of it all is quite weak, even though it's clearly all connected. The way that he kind of moves between these things never really coheses. So it's kind of like he's shouting different things at you all at the same time, or at least sort of changing lanes too quickly to follow.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm giving criminal overlord drug pushers too much credit, but I think when these things lose a bit of verisimilitude for me is when you literally cut to a person like this saying, in my mind he's chomping a big cigar. I don't know if he was actually doing it in the film, but he starts talking about how I want people on the schools, go and target the schools and give drugs to kids. It was very overt. I imagine I imagine when the mobster types are saying, let's sell drugs to kids near their schools, they probably, no one's the villain of their own story. They probably couch it in different terms.
Yeah.
It's
Well, like, have you
probably not.
seen? Well, have you seen Dope Sick?
No,
No. So that mean it's all about. You aware of it?
no.
No. So Dope Sick. It's on Disney Plus. I really recommend it. It's a small, sort of 6 or 8 episode series about the OxyContin scandal and Purdue Pharma.
Oh, I've heard of that, yes.
Yeah, really, really good. But obviously, it shows you the sort of people at the top have got the kind of, they have got that overarching kind of idea, but the way it's kind of achieved is by putting pressure down the chain. So you put pressure down them to sell a certain amount of money. They push the pressure down, and the sales tactics become more and more insidious due to the pressure to go upwards. But even from the top, they kind of realize what they want people to do, to the point where Richard Sackler actually goes out on ride-alongs with the sales reps to see how they're doing things. So it's kind of subtly pushed from the top, but with a very definite agenda. Yeah, Dope Six, it's really good. Recommend it.
Okay, I'll check it out. So what you're saying then is that
But yeah, what
in
to your
terms of the
point?
point,
Yeah, your point. Like,
that they
I
would
don't.
put the pressure on, but they wouldn't just say go to the
I
schools.
wouldn't
They'd be
say it
like,
outright. Yeah,
sales are down. Sales
yeah,
are down, guys. You got to try whatever it takes. I really
yeah.
want to see you thinking outside the box. Like, we've
Have you
really
tried?
got to
Yeah,
sell more of this stuff.
Have you
Yeah,
tried selling on these streets? You know.
yeah, exactly. Not just like,
What do
I
you
want to
mean?
give it to kids in schools.
Yeah. Well, you mean the one with the school? I don't. Is there a school on that street? I didn't know.
Yeah,
Did I that
exactly.
street? Yeah,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That, I think that was the thing. And again, like, subtlety is not necessarily a must. I did, but it's just for me. If you're not being subtle, if everything is kind of cartoonish, it does take away the verisimilitude of it actually being this kind of social. It didn't feel like The Wire. Obviously,
No,
it felt very, very flimsy in a lot of that. And I've no doubt Fuller actually did know about a lot of that stuff in a lot of detail, and could have made, if he was working today, probably he would have like an HBO miniseries kind of thing like The Wire, where he told a crime story and went into depth, and it was more like, TV novel, as as the phrase sort of 10 years ago. But like, I've no doubt Fuller would be able to kind of do something in that mold. But he's obviously working with an hour and 40 minutes with a lot of compromises,
one of his
a lot
long
of things he
ones.
can't talk about. One of his long ones, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this, if this was one of the, like you say, if it's working today, even if it wasn't a mini series, even if it was that kind of 2 hour 20 mark where you get something like The Insider or Traffic, or, that kind of slightly extended kind of social issues kind of runtime, more would go into it. But because he does make these really swift films, and he allows himself an extra 8 minutes for this one.
Have you
Can't really fit it all into the hour and
yeah,
40 minutes with any kind of degree of subtlety, I don't think.
yeah, for sure. Have you ever seen a Chekhov swimming pool before in a film?
No, I've seen I've seen a Chekhov's nipple ring in Jolt. But this big bad guy. It's a hyper violent film with Charlize Theron, I think it is, where she's going around just sort of straight up beating people up, and one of these hench guys comes out with a huge nipple ring, and you think, yeah, I know where this is going. But I've not seen
Because
Chekhov's
in
swimming pool.
Because in this one, you get a bit early on when Tully first gets to like criminal headquarters, he's standing around with Gus, and he's like, "Oh, you got a swimming pool up here?" And Gus is like, "Yeah, we've got a swimming pool here." And then Tully's like, "Hey, can we go in?" And then Gus is like, "Nah, we don't really go in there. That's not for us." And then you never see anyone like
It's for
like going
underprivileged
in. And
kids.
then, yeah, it's for underprivileged kids. And then, but actually, like, the criminal boss is always sitting by the swimming pool. And at the very end of the movie, the criminal boss and Tully go in the pool. And it did feel like, for anyone listening who kind of, knows pro wrestling, it did feel like kind of they'd set up a table, like on the
Yeah.
outside of the ring. No one had gone through it yet, they went through it at the end, which was satisfying. There's also a scene I imagine is probably quite dated. I'm not au fait with the terminology, accepted terminology these days, but the idea of the speech where the woman just shouts at the guy, "You could be a giant, but you're a midget. You're a midget," just seemed to me a bit like seemed to me a bit strange in this in the context of today, when I don't think you would just use that as an example of saying they're like a I don't say as a small person in this context. You know what she's saying? She's saying this guy could have been great, but he's rubbish. And the way she says that is, you could have been a person of very tall stature, but actually you're a person of very small stature, which is just like a bit, yeah. Obviously, I'm not gonna I'm not calling for Fuller's cancellation over this. I just think that it's worth highlighting that it's maybe not aged the best, I would say. And then what else have I got here? There was some really bad. Cuddles is like the weak link of the movie. Cuddles is rubbish. I don't like Cuddles. And she she has this typical Fuller relationship where the uncharismatic hero protagonist, they're not really a hero, but the uncharismatic protagonist treats them like shit, but then they immediately just fall head over heels in love for this person for no reason. And then there's a scene where she's drunk, and her drunk acting is so bad. Like, her drunk acting is literally like her going like, I'm so drunk, like that. Like, it really stood out to me as being particularly egregious. The drunk acting. Cuddles is a weak link. I know you're not as hard on the Fuller love angle, the Fuller love interests as I
Oh
am,
no,
but
this
I
was the most
feel like this
recent
is the low
example for me.
watermark.
Yeah, definitely. It just seemed completely unnecessary as well
It's
in this
so
kind
pointless.
of if it is going to be this kind of revenge tale, then just concentrate on that. You don't really need her. I mean, I guess she provides this idea that he's potentially got this kind of he thinks that he's got this kind of happy ever after waiting for him once he gets through with it. But I don't know if it'd be a much stronger film if he's just kind of left sort of if he finishes it through and then just sort of is like, yeah, what now then? Not like I've got a happy ever after, but like he's so all consumed by it that his life's effectively got no meaning once he's finished it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, yeah, completely. And also, I think, and this isn't the film's fault. This is me. This is me with what I bring into the cave on Dagobah. But like, I think because I was already thinking about the Bad Sleep Well, that's an unwelcome comparison, because that's one of the stronger Kurosawa like love interest, if you can call it that, like romantic situations. Because in Bad Sleep Well, Kyoko Kagawa and Toshiro Mifune's relationship is that she's involved in the crime world, similar to Cuddles. She's not like Cuddles, she's not low level, she's like the daughter of a boss. But that character's involved tangentially in the crime world. The Mifune character, or the Cliff Robertson character, uses them to get where they want to be and to get into that world, right? So it's the same relationship. But in Bad Sleep Well, that relationship is that you can see the Mifune character is using her, and that's bad. And the Mifune character feels really bad about it. And it's like a sign of how he's let himself kind of go down a kind of a bad, questionable path. And ultimately it's causing her unhappiness, and he hates that. And there's actually a surprising amount of depth, considering that that relationship doesn't have that much screen time. This relationship feels like it has a lot more screen time and no depth. And just the fact that in my mind there was like, I was seeing the films in a kind of a parallel at this
Yeah,
point.
I got that
Yeah.
parallel quite early on, and it didn't do Underworld USA any favors. Funnily enough, just looking at the Bad Sleep Well as well, it's at that 2.5 hour mark. That sweet,
Yeah.
because they do. That is also about kind of corruption at a corporate level, and police are involved, and there are a lot of parallels, not just in the story, but in some of the kind of the overarching things that the film's talking about, and the revenge story and all that kind of thing. But
It's
I suspect Kurosawa is a slightly better filmmaker.
that's true. And the thing as well is that, like, earlier on I was saying about how you know, if you're staying with the protagonist for a certain time and then you jump randomly to this other stuff, that's quite jarring. It doesn't necessarily work. But then a few years later, Kurosawa does that with High and Low, where the first half of the movie is about this Toshiro Mifune character, who's the guy whose kid's been kidnapped. And then the second half is literally like this. It goes to a police briefing. And you've got Takashi Shimura in a room talking to cop. Well, it's not Takashi Shimura in that one, is it? It's anyway, it doesn't matter. But like you've got the character in that kind of talking to a room of police and saying this is procedural stuff and talking about what they're going to do. I think the difference is that the halfway point in that film signals a kind of a clear cut where then you start following the police and the investigation very consistently. So it's not so much a kind of abrupt sort of temporary shift scene by scene as it is like a clear like dividing line halfway through the movie, and it becomes kind of a different movie. But
Yeah,
then like also those scenes
of films that pull that sort of thing off particularly well. Bad Sleep Well does it. Like the only other thing that I can think of that really does it smoothly is something like The Place Beyond the Pines.
Yeah,
where it just kind of like, especially the first transition from the first story to the other story, because it's literally, you know, one character dies at the hands of another and then you just follow the other character. Those sort of, like you say, those sort of tonal shifts or narrative shifts are really difficult to pull off, and especially when you're jumping from one to the other and back again all the time. You need to sort of commit, don't you, and kind of see that through. But anyway,
I think the other difference as well is that in the scene I was talking about in High and Low with the police, there is a lot of verisimilitude, right? There is a lot of feeling that this feels really authentic. I don't know if it is, it might not be, but it feels authentic the way that he's like talking to people from different departments in the force, and they're giving these little reports on like what they've done, and he's talking about, okay, well, you need to go down these streets and we've located him to here and here. It just felt very procedural, very detailed, and very lived in, very rich, in a way that the scenes of the police here do feel like that scene at the end of Psycho where someone's just telling us about Norman Bates's psychology. And it is just a man sort of lecturing a room, and he's talking very like, and he's saying stuff that you'd think everyone else in the room would already know. Like in the scene in High and Low I'm talking about, you've got a you've got a policeman asking questions of people in the room and them telling him things he's learning because they've been out and they've seen things and they're reporting to him. So the scene feels kind of alive, and it's got a kind of an eternal narrative to it, an eternal end goal to it. There's things happening and developments being made. Whereas in the scenes that are like that in this film, they're very inert because it's just a guy telling the audience stuff that everyone in the room would already know. Like if a policeman stands up in a room full of policemen and he goes, well, the scourge of youth crime is really affecting America, and there's a lot of drugs on those streets now, and we've really got to do our best. And you're just like, everyone in this room, unless this is just the most boring guy at the police station, they're like, oh God, they're called into Carl's office again. He's going to talk to us about the scourge of crime on the streets. It's like, it's a scene for us, and it's just exposition for the audience. There's no internal life to it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, it's very easy to spot those sort of things where you think,
yeah,
you're saying things that surely everybody else knows. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Why is this conversation here? But yeah. I mean, I'm usually I try and talk you around a little bit and say, this is better than you thought. But to be honest, I struggled with this one a little bit.
I tell you what, it has done.
I'd like to read up a little bit more about, exactly why it was considered so highly. It went into the Library of Congress. That seems, I don't know, maybe again it's difficult without context to think about what other films were saying at this time. And there wasn't really, again, in his book, he doesn't really talk about the kind of critical or commercial reception to this one. It's I don't know if he's losing interest in his own biography at this point, but but that sort of information that he put in into some of the others isn't really here, sorry. But yeah it had
I was going to say the thing that this has really made me want to do is watch The Bad Sleep Well again. That's kind of the energy I've gotten from talking about this film.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's not really that much else to say about Underworld USA, at least from our point of view. I don't think, is there?
Yeah, not really. I was going to say there are still every Fuller film where he writes the dialogue has some real like Fullerism zingers, and I only wrote a few of them down, like the I'm gonna miss you, baby, and stuff like. There's always like some real good like just zingers. And there was one where I think it's the police guy. He's saying to Tully because against his advice, he's going to go back and he's going to confront the guy and get himself killed. And I think it's the police guy. He says to him like, "Tell your pride to wear black," which I thought was an amazing line. There's always like good little nuggets in these Fuller films in terms of the dialogue, especially when he writes them. I know during some of the Fox years he wasn't always writing the scripts, and that they kind of always suffered when it wasn't him actually writing the lines. But when he is, you can really tell. You can tell that that's pure Fuller. That line is. Yeah, it's in middle of the pack for me. This one, it's middle of the pack Fuller. It is if I had to recommend somebody a Fuller film to watch, I would probably recommend something like Steel Helmet or Crimson Kimono or something. But if I had to recommend them a film so that they could get a really good encapsulation of what Sam Fuller films are generally like on average, this is the Fuller film du jour for me. This ticks all the boxes of what Sam Fuller movies are like at their kind of best and at their worst. Their tropes, their excesses, their the kind of the holes, the pitfalls maybe they fall into, the compromises, as you've said, about like his vision versus what he was able to do, the constraints of budget, the constraints of the time and the subject matter that he's able to explore, his love of these sort of social problemy, slightly preachy kind of moments, the love interest that's completely unearned and falls for the shit guy one scene after he's just been a twat. Like, it's got everything in it, this movie. It's like it's peak Fuller in terms of his oeuvre, I would say. But it's not good. It's not the best Fuller, but it's representative.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Okay, right. So let's put that one to bed and talk about what's coming next, shall we?
What is next? What's happening? It's Shot Corridor. No, it's not Shot Corridor. There's one more between now and then. Merrill's
Yeah,
Marauders, isn't it?
Merrill's Marauders. Yeah. So this
Is that a
is
western? Sounds like it sounds like it could be a western or a war movie. Merrill's
it's a
Marauders.
war movie set during the Burma campaign. We're back into color with
Okay.
this one as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, it's one that I don't know too much about apart from the name itself. Which I read quite it whenever I was reading up about Fuller previously. Merrill's Marauders always seemed to sort of be there lurking in the background as something that was referenced referenced in relation to the things that I was reading about, if that makes sense. So I don't know if this is potentially I don't know if this is potentially hipster's choice Fuller. But again, I know it's I know that it was well regarded, and from my first little bit of basic research here, apparently there was a comic book tie-in for this one. So,
Oh, really?
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah. But anyway, yeah. So we're off to Burma with Sam Fuller next time round on our quest to.
That is interesting. 98 minutes as well. So that's the exact same, isn't it? As what we just watched.
I think
I
so.
think that was
Yeah.
about. Oh no, I think it was about 10 minutes longer. The Underworld U.S.A. But anyway, 98 minutes, solid runtime. Awesome. CinemaScope, color, excellent. I'm looking
Which we
like
know,
has he got
previous example, we know that when he works in colouring in CinemaScope, it looks great. At least, especially compared to what we've just seen, that does kind of feel like a backward step visually in a lot of places. So hopefully
this
we're
one
back
was
on.
distributed. This one's distributed by Warner Brothers as well, so it makes me think it's got a little bit more behind it in terms of the production value. But yeah, interesting. I'm looking forward to Marauders. It's actually one that's available completely legitimately on a streaming service I subscribe to as well, which is always nice.
It's on
So I
Criterion.
can watch it in good quality. What's that?
Which streaming service is it on?
It's on Filmin, which is a service which is in Spain, which is very good. If you're a Spanish listener or a listener with a VPN, Filmin is a very good film streaming service. But yeah, Marauders is on there. Excellent. I'm looking forward to that. So we'll do that within the next couple of weeks, I suspect.
Yeah, we had a bit of a break for this one, didn't we? But yeah,
we did. Yeah, we've been away for a little while. But yeah, thank you very much for listening and bearing with us through our discussion of another Sandford film. I'm excited to watch the next one as we continue along our path to obtain a fuller understanding. Thank you very much, and yeah.